So this open meeting of the Acton Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the local state of emergency declared by the Acton Board of Selectmen and the Board of Health due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the Board of Selectmen has suspended all public gatherings, and in accordance with the Governor's orders, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The Governor's order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the board or committee hosts of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will allow future public or will allow public comment briefly. For this meeting, the Acton Finance Committee is convening by Zoom conference as posted on the meeting agenda, town website, the calendar, identifying how the public may be going. Please note that meetings are being recorded and some attendees are participating via video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that folks may be able to see you and anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All the materials for this meeting, except for executive session materials, which we do not have, are available to the public on the DocuShare folder. There have been amended members of the public. All the agenda is posted. The chair as we go through our meeting this evening. We'll now be turning to our first agenda item, which is public participation. And if anybody in the public would like to comment, please raise their hand. I do see that we do have a few. And I see that Adam Nolde is on, I think, Peter Lights off. Okay, so seeing none, oops, we do. Oh, great.
Yeah.
We have public participation.
Yeah, you'll see David Diedrichson.
Yeah, we have somebody else in the public who is going to be first.
Okay. But then you'll acknowledge David.
Hello.
Hi, it's Tara from West Acton. Please don't put my name in the Zoom. I'm concerned still about the idea of having an on-site town meeting. And I wanted to bring your attention to Jeffrey Beckwith and the Mass Municipal Association is working on a bill to make it easier for towns to wait. And the language of that is available, although not quite approved, but we expect approval in the next few days. I can read a key paragraph to you, if you'd like. The House also added language to allow cities and towns to use special revenue funds and stabilization fund amounts to pay for fiscal 2021 expenses through a 2/3 vote of the select board in a town and the council in a city and towns with town council. So I urge you to reconsider holding a town meeting, certainly inside, and I would prefer outside, although I think we should wait altogether. I don't want to infest people with either mosquitoes or toxic poisons to kill mosquitoes. So rather than sitting in a virus cloud or a cloud of toxic mosquito killing, I'd rather wait. But thank you very much.
Roland, you're muted.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to have Mike, why don't you take over and introduce your...
Oh, yeah. I would like to, you'll see in the lucky square down below is David Diedrichson, his Acton resident, former proprietor and owner of the Willow Books here in Acton, a very successful bookstore. Former executive director of the Retail Association of Massachusetts and a well-respected member of the Economic Development Committee. And David has a few comments regarding a letter that we just sent that the EDC sent under David's signature to the governor that addresses the plight of the small business not being able to open. So, and I'd like to introduce.
We're taking this stuff under committee business. These just came up rather late, but so go ahead. Go ahead, David. You're on mute.
Unmute. Is that better? That work? Okay. I don't really understand all the muting. There's a lot of people I wish I could mute in my life. Anyway, so yes, I owned Willow Books, and I was in retail for 45 years. I opened about 50 stores all over the country with different chains, independent and chain companies. I have to correct one thing that Mike said. I was not the executive director for the Retail Association of Massachusetts. I was a board member and on the executive committee for 15 years, and I'm still emeritus on that board. So I do talk to a lot of retailers around the state. My concern at the EDC meeting and the reason we came up with the letter, I assume everybody has seen a copy of the letter we sent to the governor? No? Do I need to recap it, or people seen it, or? I don't see much reaction.
Yeah, I had forwarded it to the committee yesterday.
Well, I'll summarize. Basically,
Mike, I don't think that email came through because I don't have any email from you. I'm so sorry. We would have absolutely read this letter in advance.
It was in my spam folder. So I think we're still having a little trouble, Mike, with your stuff trying to spam sometimes.
Although it came from EDC, so I don't know. It came from the town. Anyway, well, it's there. It's available. I'll be happy to provide a copy for anyone who wants it. So basically, my point to the governor was that we are facing, among all the crises that we face, we're facing a real tsunami of a crisis for the retailers, especially the small towns. And I think all too often we'll see things out of Boston, whether it's the State House or otherwise, that they're pretty good at addressing Boston's concerns, but they're pretty bad at anything outside of Boston. Anything beyond 128 is like the Wild West to them. So I was trying to appeal to him to reconsider the way he defined essential businesses. I was just parenthetically, or anecdotally, I should say, I was out getting my haircut today for the first time in months. And I had to go to a Target because nothing's open of the things that I need, and I needed, so I had to go to a Target in Framingham. The place was packed. I mean, absolutely hundreds of people in there. It wasn't unsafe. They were careful to make social distancing. But, you know, I bought my things, and I thought, you know, these are all things I would have bought in Acton if I could have. And then I thought about all my friends who have businesses in Acton. I thought about my business. I would be out of business. If I was still in business, I would close my doors. There's no way you can get back those 2-3 months. It just can't be done. In retail, you know, your costs never go away. Your income can go down, but your costs never go away. Even if you lay off people and all that, there's so much overhead. Every single thing you do, from the rent to, you know, the fees, you know, to, you know, even collecting your garbage. You know, you got to keep collecting. The guy has to come collect your garbage. So it's really dire. And if you look at a town like Acton, I've lived here for 32 years. This is a town that our local businesses are a big part of the character of the town. And one of the reasons that I have stayed here all these years is because there are a lot of good local businesses. You know, I really like going in and seeing that I know the people that I'm buying things from and dealing with. I know that they take care of me. I like going to, you know, Willow's Kitchen Outfitters. I like going to Gould's. I like going to Donald's. The Donald's have been, you know, tremendous citizens over the years. And so, you know, I feel a lot for this community. And it bothers me that people in control would assume that small stores are incapable of doing a safe structure in the COVID environment. I mean, I was in Target today. I was much more exposed. I was more exposed going to the dump than I probably would be with most of the businesses in town. If most of these places, you know, they're small places, they have maybe 3 or 4 people at a time. And I mean, the fact that maybe some of them wouldn't want to open anymore, but the fact that we tell them they can't, it got to me as being really unfair and extremely unwise. And I'll tell you why. Because when this thing finally ends, when they finally get around to letting everyone be back in business in a safe way, I'm not asking for it. If you read the letter, you'll see that I had a respectful tone and I was asking for safe consideration. But once this thing is over, about half the businesses in this town are going to be gone. I mean, it's going to happen because they've just taken too many hits. It's been months and they can't sustain it. They don't have these big corporate entities. And Amazon, I mean, this is like a gift to Amazon. Amazon is, we're giving the richest man in the world more money than he even needed. And we're just, because once there's people say, well, they can do drop off. That's not realistic. I mean, you might get a few of those, but there's no substitute for having people go in your store and shop and see the different things. And they're there for one thing, they see something else. Oh, you know what else I could use? That's just the nature of retail. If you train people to go online to order, they're going to go to Amazon because Amazon is very rapacious and they will discount everything. They sell a lot of their products below cost because they want you are the product. You think you're the customer, but you're the product because they have all your information. They know what you buy. They know what you look at. And they sell that information. It has a price. So they don't make any money on the retail side of the business at all. They use it to get information about you and all the other people. So that's okay. I'm not knocking their model. It worked for them. But I'm saying, why give them a leg up? It's bad enough that we didn't charge tax all those years. So all the people who work in your town and your state, who pay their taxes, who raise their kids, who give money to all the charities, I can't even tell you how many times every single week I'd get all these people, a little brownie troop or, this or the baseball thing, or they donate here. Can you take out an ad in our, annual thing? I mean, those things all go away. And it's a lot. It's a lot. If you think about things like the 4th of July celebration that really is paid for by local businesses, these local businesses are suffering. They're really, really suffering. And I know that the selectmen announced a grant of $100,000, I think it was. And that's great, and that's really nice. And in the short term, I think it's a nice gesture, and it also shows the town cares. But these businesses are part of the community. They don't just serve the community. So in the end, what you're going to be left with, if something doesn't change pretty soon, is big boxes, which Acton doesn't have any of, and coffee shops and nail salons and karate studios, and that's it. And my big fear is that we're gonna end up caving and just build all residential, and that's not going to do anything for the tax base of this town. And I think EDC, our original goal was to find ways to increase the business base because businesses pay a lot less than they get back a lot less than they pay in, whereas residents is the other way around. I think at the time we did it was like businesses pay $1.40 for every dollar that they get back, and individual residences was like 75 cents. So, do the math. You want businesses in town. You may not want big businesses, but also I think there's just, you want to go to Florida or Texas or something and see rows and rows, miles and miles of strip malls. I mean, that's what we're looking at down the road. I don't think that's the kind of character for a town that we want. So that was my reason sending a letter, and I'm just appealing to you to, I don't know what the solution is because it's multiple compound problems, obviously. But I do think it's important to let people know it's not going to be a matter of flipping back on when these businesses go because they're already hurting a lot. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, David. I appreciate the insight, and I think the committee can also glean from that as well. Does anybody in the committee have any questions? David? Jason? Then Christy.
Mostly just a question for John and David. The $100,000 grant is a direct pass-through from the CARES Act, the federal fund. It's not coming from Acton taxpayer dollars at all, correct? That's just a straight flow through from, perfect, then I'm good with it. And by all means, we encourage you to plead your case with the state. Keep up the good fight.
Christy?
Listening to some of the Board of Selectmen discussion, it sounds like rent is generally the largest expense for a lot of the companies, especially in the current situation. David,
After
What was that?
After payroll. Payroll is payroll's the largest expense.
Okay, and do you think most places have still kept their full staff?
Say that again?
Do you think most places have still kept their whole staff?
Well, that's a huge generalization. It depends on the business. I would say most of them will not, probably.
I'm just wondering what it's costing businesses to stay alive right now.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last.
I'm wondering what it's costing businesses to stay alive right now.
Well, again, that depends on the business. I mean, if you're a karate studio, it probably is not that bad because you don't have a lot of, material goods. But in retail stores, for instance, like the one I owned, a huge amount of it is your inventory. Well, if you don't pay for your inventory, you're not going to get any more inventory. And so all these people are already in the hole quite a bit. And I don't think there's a quick fix. There's nothing. I'm not asking the town or even the state to do anything out of pocket, but I really think we need to put a little bit of pressure on the governor to take a look at small towns. Our way of living is totally different than Cambridge, or Boston or Somerville. I mean, what makes sense for them doesn't make sense for us. We can handle being open. We can handle our smaller retailers, and I guarantee you, in a town like this one, they're going to be a lot more responsible than, a lot of people that would work in big box stores. And I guarantee you that they're not, like Amazon, you get nothing from them. They're just taking our money and taking it to Seattle.
Adam, did you have a question?
I just wanted to echo what David said about the fact that some of these small businesses we have in town can conduct business in a safe way. And I know that it's a statewide restriction. It's not that it's the Acton Board of Health that is keeping them from being open. If Stop and Shop and Ace Hardware and businesses like that can do the volume of business that they're doing in some of these takeout food places, and we don't seem to be having a massive spread of COVID in the community, I have felt since the beginning there's a lot of businesses that were forced to shut down that really didn't need to be shut down. And I think the bookstore is probably a good example of that. I actually think, barbershops are another good example of that, that if people follow the right guidelines, they could be doing business rather than being completely shuttered and doing nothing. So I just wanted to echo that publicly, just to help and support and hopefully get that back. I did want to ask Dave a question about, we're kind of divided as an advisory board, whether, giving tax incentives would be helpful to small businesses in the community. And, I just kind of wanted your opinion on, the small businesses that and your own small business. Is there any amount of tax incentive or give back from the town that can really do anything to save businesses at this point, short of, throwing out 3 months worth of revenue? What do you think the viability of saving businesses is?
I think in the short term, yes, it helps because they have to get over a hump. But if this goes on much longer, there's nothing you can do that's going to help save them. They're done because they're being put out of business by their own government. And I understand the reasons. I'm not trying to cast aspersions. I'm not trying to be unfair. I understand there's grave responsibilities involved with making these decisions. But I don't think they thought it through all the way. I think that they need, I would argue for more local control on some of these issues. I mean, there's all kinds of communities across the state. So to have one person in Boston make a decision that's one size does not fit all, that to me, but in answer to your question, I would say if it goes on much longer, I don't see how any of them are going to say it's going to be just too low, too late. I'm not a big fan of, government handouts or largesse or anything like that to businesses anyway. But I think it's, in the short term, it's helpful. And I think they could certainly do a lot with fees. And going forward, the administrative process is very important. Like when these restaurants start to open again, is the Board of Health going to be in there breathing down their neck and picking out every little tiny thing that they can find? Or they're going to work with the businesses to help them, maybe be a little more relaxed in the beginning so they can get open. I had my run-ins with the town a number of times. It's very difficult to do business in Acton, very difficult. And it's just because there's just lots of regulations and lots of different administrators, all operating under different, authorities and rules, and it's a lot to absorb. So I would say if there's anything we could do that would really help is when we finally do start opening, tell the town to just, go easy, give them a break, let them get settled before you come down their throats. And, when I had a little cafe and I had a store, this woman who she's no longer here. She would come in the store and do stuff like walk in the back and take milk out of the coffee thing and stick a thermometer in it and go, you're 3 degrees off. You've got to toss that whole thing and redo we go like, okay, well, just a little cafe. So, there's a certain point at which, the authorities need to sort of back off. And I would lobby for that more than I would even lobby for a lot of money being passed out.
Well, I wonder if failing a change from the governor, if an entire town couldn't practice a little bit of civil disobedience and just buck some of that system.
I'll carry a placard. I don't have a business anymore, but
Thank you, David. Good comment.
Thank you for letting me know.
Christine, then David.
So it sounds like you're not specifically asking anything of the Finance Committee at this time. Is that the case?
Right. I'm not. I personally am not recommending anything that you do that other than lend support to the idea that small businesses can and should be and need to be open, or we're going to lose a lot of them. And that's going to affect our entire town in so many ways.
So just keep in mind, I would have you, that Georgia has reopened a lot of businesses. And one of the reasons that they have not seen any kind of spike, not any real spike in their continued COVID-19 cases is that people aren't going out. Right after they opened, there was a very small spike. And then everything settled back down to almost exactly where it was before everything opened. We only have 10% of the population at this point who's been exposed, which means 90% left. And as we start to open things and people start to go out, things are going to shut down again. This is going to be off and on for possibly a year and a half. And there's only going to be so much that anybody can do, as sad as that is, for a lot of these businesses and small businesses. So I mean, I wish them the best and we'll do the things that we can do. But unfortunately, there's just going to be a lot of negative downside to this that's beyond a lot of people's control.
Right. Can I just respond to that? May I? There's a difference between people choosing to do that on their own and being told by the authorities you may not open your business. And there are a number of businesses, I could name about 5 or 6, that, really would be perfectly safe. And if it was their choice to do it, that's the risk that they take. If you're in business, you take risk. You're used to that. I mean, some days it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there was a snowy Christmas, I get wiped out that year. Okay, that's how it goes. But that's a lot different than the government telling you can't open because we, in our judgment, think that you are incapable of behaving in a responsible way. And I think that's a very slippery slope. And also, it's going to be very sad in this town if we lose, half or 2/3 of our small businesses. And there's going to be a revenue issue down the road because, I don't know where all these new businesses are going to come from. They're not going to be there. So you're going to look at more residential and more tax problems.
Dave Wellinghoff.
Yeah, my question was actually what Christine had said is, was there a specific request? And, to that end, thank you for the information. I do have a question is, in my view, we're a good audience for what you're discussing, but we're probably far from the best. And, the better might be the Board of Health and the Board of Selectmen and so on. I'm just curious, maybe if you could quickly just summarize their reception. 'Cause I think the gist of your request is obviously reasonable, let's be a little more light-handed with opening businesses and, be a little more, giving people their own responsibilities and allowing people to have their own freedom of decisions on these things. And I think that's reasonable personally. But again, the finance committee, we're maybe not necessarily the best board to really have any influence into that. So I was just curious if you had any reception with the Board of Health or Board of Selectmen.
I have. This is you're my first
Okay.
board, so
Oh, great. Yeah, good dry run. I think you said it well, and I think they're very point making, and the distinction between Boston and suburban communities, particularly out here where we have more of a residential tax base versus the city, and so on and so forth. I think you're making those points.
Get more space.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, absolutely, and they may have a much lower tax rate for the residents because there's a huge commercial base, and I think you're making those points well, and so. But one size doesn't fit all, and no, I wish you luck, and I agree. We don't want to be heavy-handed with reopening, but we also want to be somewhat respectful that people are going to have concerns, and but that's part of the nature of living with this, I think, until we get a vaccine, which is just the nature of the beast for at least the next 6 to 12 months in my mind.
Mr. Chairman,
no, I wish you luck with it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could expand upon what Dave Willingoff just said. And then Adam has his hand up too, but he has no camera. Just to reiterate what I said on the EDC meeting, by all means, I believe that Acton officials in their role should make absolutely sure that they're being even-handed. I don't want one restaurant being told you can only be at 25% capacity, and the other one let slide and go to 40. And I'm not saying we're doing that at all. We're having that kind of shenanigan at all anywhere in town. So I just want to make sure I reiterate that statement that I want to make it absolutely clear that the governmental role is to be even-handed in how rules and regulations are handed out, which does lead me to ask. Perhaps as more of a thought process, you talked about someone coming in and busting your chops for your milk being 3 degrees too warm. But let's play that out. How far are you willing to go? Are you willing to say that the current guidelines from the Board of Health are whatever they are, but we're going to decide, we're just going to go ahead and take the chance and say, no, whatever the guidelines are, we're going to go to 75%. Do you extend that to everything? Do you extend that to, well, shirt and shoes are usually required for service in a restaurant, but that's an impingement on freedom, and therefore we should have some civil disobedience on that as well. How far are you willing to play this out? But because what you've just described is saying, why don't we just let the rules and regulations slide? And I get a little nervous about that kind of, well, we'll just do a wink and a nod while we let things open. Do you not have any? Where's the limit of where the respect of what the rules and regulations should be and what should be tolerated?
The limit is the reasonableness of the person who's doing the enforcement, and that's true of everything that the government ever does. If I get pulled over by a cop, I'm sure you've all had this experience. You get pulled over, well, you're going a little fast on there, but I could give you a ticket, but I'll let you go with a warning. Because the idea is to get you to do the behavior that you want them to do. And so, yes, officer, I mean, we've all been there, right? So that's the same thing happens with regulations. But sometimes if someone doesn't, you give people a little control. I'm not saying it goes to their head, but sometimes, in order to make sure that they get listened to, they can be a little more enforceful than they need to be, or they could be reasonable and look at the long-term goal where we want to get. In the example I cited, I felt that person who did that to me, busted our chops over 3 degrees, could have easily said, all right, this is the warning. Now this is what you have to do. Next time I come in, I want to see it in the right place. And they would have solved the problem a lot easier, quicker, the same result without bad feelings. And I'm just saying, avoid the bad feelings. That's all I'm saying. It's not something that always comes easily to all of the people.
Very hard to be subjective. Very hard to be subjective on that. So I just caution, it's very hard to be subjective, and you're allowing for a wink and a nod, which is unenforceable if you start allowing too much individual leeway.
If you want a police state, you don't have to have a wink and a nod, but we don't have that, right? We don't want that. We want a friendly town, which is what we think we have. So I think there's friendly ways to do it and there are unfriendly ways to do it, and that's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right, so
thanks,
now
guys.
we'll go back to our agenda.
Okay,
Okay.
I'll bail. I'll let you guys deal with
Thank you.
it.
I appreciate the insight.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Okay, so did everybody get a chance to look at the ALG spreadsheet? And if Steve Barrett and Brian could go over the ALG and the updates to municipal, I would appreciate that.
Brian, you want me? I'll take that. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman. Good evening, everyone. So let me just pull up the right spreadsheet. So when ALG March 10th, I think, was the warrant date, we had a zero plan position. We've done a couple of things. If you went to the changes tab, you'd see a few things there. You would see that in consultation with John Mangiarotti, Brian, myself, we moved the FY21 state aid for the municipal down 22,000 to the FY20 ALG budgeted levels. We reduced local receipts, which, you know, we had put in a robust kind of 2.5% in FY21 for local receipts. We pulled that 2.5% guidance down, and we moved that to a zero off of the FY20 ALG budgeted levels. We reduced new growth to FY20 levels. You know, new growth is the additional taxes we get on construction in place and things like that. We also increased the overlay account, which is the bad debt expense, by $50,000. There was also some administrative actions. The municipal budget change was $215,000. We can go through that. The regional school district also reduced their assessment by $428,000. If you look at the net of all of that math, the net position on the plan is $152,000. So again, these changes, these budget changes have been voted by the entities already. So, you know, what we're trying to do, at least in my mind, is we're trying to reset FY21 at some FY20 budgeted revenue levels as we proceed cautiously into FY21. You know, that's the plan right now as we move forward. And you know, if there are, you know, possible cuts in state aid, or within a few months we'll have our FY20 year-to-date data. You know, with more time comes more information. So, you know, at the end of the day, we made these changes to the ALG plan. Oh, the other change I forgot to talk about was we lowered reserve use by that $215,000, commensurate with the municipal budget change. So, you know, at the end of the day, we rolled back a lot of our revenue estimates. We reduced the budget. We reduced reserve use. So, you know, in my mind, you know, we're hunkering down a little bit to get ready. So
What is the net from what was previously the budget to what it's going to be now? The net difference? I mean, so what was it before the whole thing happened that we were going to go to town meeting with, and what is it now?
So
On the municipal side.
yeah, the municipal side, we were going to expend $36,915,202, which is a 2.94% spending package. If you look now, we're at $36,700,202. In terms of those changes, what we've done, and the Board of Selectmen's adopted it, we have reduced the sustainability policy, some of the implementation by $15,000. We reduced the Town Hall ADA bathroom project by, I believe, $150,000. and then we reduced the bonding cost by $50,000 for the Kelly's Corner and sidewalks. So those bonding amounts have come down. So at the end of the day, our total spending package is up 2.34% on the ALG side. The schools also redid their budget. Their operating budget, let's see, they were at 3.06%, and the new plan has them at 2.36% for FY 21. So both entities are right in line. And that's about it on ALG. It's next Thursday. And so I think you guys know, you folks know what we know.
Jason.
I'm happy to see reductions. I like the concept of hunkering down for the coming storm. Sometimes we say we're saving for a rainy day. It sure as hell feels like it's raining. I would like to propose that rather than merely reducing the town hall ADA bathroom for the Francis Faulkner meeting room, let's just completely postpone that for some number of years. It's not like anyone's going to be in the Francis Faulkner meeting room anytime soon.
Hey, I got to jump in, Jason. I was just looking at my spreadsheet. I had it switched. We reduced complete streets by 150, not the ADA bathroom. That's my bad.
Okay, I think we should postpone it altogether. No one's going to be in that room for the next 6 to 9 months to begin with. So let's and we've gotten along just fine without it for 280 years. I would suspect that this is not something that has the fierce urgency of now that has to happen. So I would put that off indefinitely.
John Mangiarotti.
I just was going to clarify the capital reduction. Steve already did that. But just with regards to the bathroom, the ADA issue in Town Hall is something that I think is very important for us to address if we're able to do so. The Board of Selectmen supported moving forward with that last night. And if the building isn't really going to be used for 6 to 9 months, it would be a perfect time to do the bathroom over.
Not going to get in use.
John Benson, do you have any comment on that?
We adopted the proposed cuts that John and the finance people proposed to us in getting the cost down from what I think it was 2.9 to 2.3%, and we're comfortable going with that. I don't you can pick at this stuff and say, well, defer on that or do this or juggle this around. That's what John did, and this is what he came up with, and we're quite comfortable with it.
Okay. Christy.
Steve, I've been looking at the ALG spreadsheets comparing the March 10th one to the one we just got. And while the tax levy has changed up above at the top line, I'm sorry. What I really want to get at is the dollar change expected in the single family tax bill. I was trying to email you about this earlier and getting confused. You still have the total valuation for fiscal year 21 going up. And then I understand the tax bill just gets spread across all the houses, but you have the total valuation going up and the single family value increasing. What are those increases based on right now? Do we still have projects in the pipeline, large projects, construction projects that we're expecting to have come into town that would increase the total town property valuation? I know we're just talking about how the pie gets split up here, but I was a little surprised to see that that section hadn't changed, even though the tax levy revenue had.
Sure, let me quickly hand that one off to Brian McMullen. Do I see him out there, or is he not in with us? Oh, there he is. Brian is our assistant director and principal assessor. Chris, he can talk a little bit about that. It gets a little detailed, but give it a shot, Brian, if you can do it in 10 words or less.
Yeah, so some of the changes, Christy, that you see in the tax levy, so are related to new growth. So as Steve had mentioned in his opening comments about the ALG plan, we lowered the new growth expectations going forward. We think there's going to be a bit of slowdown in new construction. However, I don't think that's going to have a great or significant impact on the single family home, meaning a majority of that valuation is based on sales when I change it from year to year. The construction will add a small component to it, but so you see the total levy decreases due to the new construction change, but the single family home value is not going to be significantly impacted by it.
Okay, but under the tax impact section of the ALG, under total valuation, that number is the same across both models, the March 10th model and the model from the other day. So shouldn't new growth be down? Wouldn't that number therefore be down?
I don't have both plans in front of me.
We can get you a written answer on that in the morning. We'll get on that.
My concern here really is that when we're presenting this to people and they are not going to get a correct idea of what their tax bill change is if it's based on an incorrect total valuation number.
We'll look at it. I mean, we'll have to look at the two plans, Christy, and get back to you. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah, can you send it to us and highlight what you're looking at so we have a clear understanding of what we need to review?
I can try. I'll try that.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Christy. Thank you. I appreciate the revisions that you've done, both on the school side and obviously on the town side to lower the tax burden during this whole time. I'm sure that the town has also seen some benefit where we're using less electricity in town hall, and things like that. There's less people being in there, and et cetera. I know my company sure the heck is. Is there any finance department updates, Mr. Barrett or Brian? Oh, sorry, Christine.
Thank you. Steve, I'm just curious on your thoughts on this. I mean, we've kind of talked about a potentially dismal economic situation coming forward. And when I think of, what we're doing for our family, looking at what we spend our money on versus what we thought we were going to spend our money on in the coming year or two, this doesn't feel like much of a renew or reduction or strong look at the expected spending versus what we were expecting in revenue. So I would love your take if you could put in your 2 cents on the $200,000 cut.
Which Steve are you?
Noon. Sorry, Noon. I was looking for sage advice from Steve Noon.
Smart call. I was waiting for Steve Barrett to chime in on that one. Probably not going to be enough, but we have no new hard information to go on. This is fine as far as it goes. Well, I hope this is all we need to do, but my experience says there'll be more cuts to be made in FY21. But we don't have a state aid number. We don't know if there's going to be any relief out of Washington. The list of things we don't know is so much longer than the list of things we do know that it's hard to criticize any reduction. My feeling is we need to look at it in terms of, okay, this is nice. Now, what's plan B, C, D,
the triggers that you asked for.
Yeah, what happens when, the state cuts state aid by 20% instead of 10? So those are the things that we need to address going forward. We have a little bit of time. These things don't happen overnight. The reason I sent out that draft of the ancient cost savings initiative report last time was it contained a bunch of thoughts, ideas, things that we talked about in 2010 and 2011. some of which came to pass and some of which didn't. But the gist of that list was there were big ideas and there were little ideas, but there are a lot of ideas, and I think that's kind of where we need to be going next on this.
Christie, you to follow up?
Christine?
Okay.
I thought you asked if Steve was going to follow up. My bad. Which I found amusing that he wasn't going to follow up, and you were all looking at me. I don't know. It feels like there are still some more wants in this budget than needs. That, you know, if it were on a smaller scale, I would, for instance, a household budget, we just wouldn't do. We'd put it off. Because of the uncertainty, because of what we don't know, because it could be fine, and that would be amazing, or it could be way worse than we can imagine, and then we're stuck having, you know, overspent and not done any service to the taxpayers in doing so. It just doesn't feel like we took. I don't know. It feels like a lot of people are just gonna keep going on the way we were and hoping for the best, fingers crossed, and I don't share their optimism. That's
Don't sign the contract for the bathroom yet.
Well, I think we do have to look at, you know, when we commit to things. We can plan to do things, but if the situation deteriorates more rapidly than we're thinking, we may have to, you know, not exactly go forward. You know, most of our revenue comes from property taxes, and most of that money is going to get paid in FY21. In fact, just about all of it. What we're talking about is the 13% of our revenue that flows from other sources, and it won't all be gone, but some part of it will. Yeah, there won't be the new growth. There won't be the building permits. There won't be the excise taxes that we've seen in other years. Certainly won't be the meals tax.
Wheels tax going to be triple, right?
If we lost all $300,000, it wouldn't kill us, you know. But yeah, we're going to get a hit on revenue. State aid, I don't, you know, I wouldn't want to be in Charlie Baker's shoes right now. You know, I think John Peterson forwarded Rollo and I a study by J.P. Morgan on what would happen to state pension plans and what they would have to pay just to make up for the COVID-19 problems and the loss of their investment return. And Massachusetts looked like, as a percent of total revenue, Massachusetts pension funding was going to have to double.
Well, I guess there's nothing today that was on pensions, and the Mass Teachers Association was one of those in the top 25 with serious problems.
It's
not gonna be
it hasn't been funded over 50% in a long time.
Right, and they said a lot of it can't be made up. It's not going to be made up by investment returns. It's going to be made up by putting serious money in there. When Governor Baker had his $1 billion last year, they gave extra money to CPA. That could have been used to shore up pensions in the Commonwealth, like $50 million. Now, it wouldn't have been a lot, but it would have been something.
So our issues really come down to the most jeopardy we're in is on state aid. The town's dependence on the state is fairly limited. The schools is broader. So in the 2008-2009 recession, the federal government paid money directly to the schools under the Ed Jobs program to keep teachers and other employees employed. And back then, you may have seen most of the collective bargaining units in town agreed to take a zero COLA year or some other concessions. But that didn't happen the first couple of months. that took a long time to get that effort going. Started out in the Finance Committee, but it spread into a joint committee. Finance Committee actually, if you want to have an adventure, I suggest you try this one. We actually had an open forum with the town members, an open mic night. Don't know if you can do it now. An open Zoom night where we invited everybody in town to come in and say, if you got any ideas on how to save money, let us know. And some of them were good. Some of them were patently illegal. But we gave people a chance to talk. Like I said, you can see from the list, we had an exhaustive list of things to look at, and we studied each and every one of them. So yeah, when we start taking this a little bit more serious, that's the step you take. Right now, would I have liked to have seen us cut $1 million out of next year's budget? Sure. Might we have to anyway? It's quite possible.
Well, at the risk of stirring the pot, I would point out the superintendent of the school district has decided to forego his pay increase next year. Just saying, in case anyone on here is paid by the state, paid by the town.
So that's, what is that, 83% of that goes to us?
That's right.
All right. No, I think we need, the failure to see this coming is certainly excusable from just about any government level, certainly the town of Acton. Failure to react to it once you know it's there, that's kind of unforgivable. So we can start small and work into bigger ideas. We can start big and work into smaller ideas, but we have to be working on it, and it's a start.
Great. Any other questions? Comments? Christy?
Steve, I'm curious how you would match that up with your point the other day about cutting services last, that we should keep staff, given that staff is such a large percentage of our budget. And I'm not saying we should cut staff. I just want to know how you balance those two ideas. My inclination is to cut as much as we can here until we see how much better things are than we thought.
My viewpoint on staff is more colored by a lot of years on this committee and a lot of years at looking at comparative data. As a town, we've never been overly staffed in terms of teachers, policemen, or firemen. Every time we would do the comparisons, we would find out we were, in terms of student-teacher ratios, we were among the worst in the state. We were woefully behind on policemen for years. And finally, a few years ago, we got out of the civil service system, so we at least could start to hire qualified people. And I think we're still probably short a few firemen from where the standards are set. I mean, the state kind of indicates where your teacher should be. The FBI recommends police officers per 1,000 population, and the National Fire Protection Association recommends how many firefighters you should have per 1,000. And like I said, for years we never measured up to any of those standards.
Just wait until we staff up the new station.
We've gotten closer. We've certainly improved policemen. I think we're probably still short on firemen, but I know there's no particular plan to add firemen just to redeploy them. I think we've improved on student-teacher ratios, but we're still not in the best position we could be. The flip side of it was, our single-family tax bill was also not considered one of the best in the state. In fact, we were always in the top 20 for the highest. So there was limited amounts of flexibility to add personnel. So my feeling on personnel is a long-winded question is we've struggled to get to where we are. I'd hate to start cutting them when we don't have to. If this is going to be a shorter-term crisis, I'd rather defer capital and maintenance and things like that. We can also we can look, pretty much at anything that we could, like Christine was saying, when you look at your household budgets, this may not be the year to paint the house. You have my sympathies if you got a kid heading to college, but it's one of those years when, if you go back to the rule of thumb we always used to use on this committee, which was, hey, if it was my money, would I spend this? This is the year you really don't spend anything you don't have to until it's clear which way it's going. So,
in light of that, I was very surprised in conversations that we've seen with John Mangiarotti and the Board of Selectmen that there really didn't seem to be any discussion about cutting some of the expenses that could be cut this year or delayed, such as I think it's a roll-off truck for the transportation, for the transfer station. Now, I know I think that's paid for out of the enterprise fund, but it doesn't seem like there have been particular delays in things.
Well, Roland, could John just speak for a moment on the open staff positions that we've not filled?
Well, hold on. I want to say I'm not saying that we should be cutting staff. I'm surprised.
No. But we have not, on account of the crisis, we have not hired a host of staff for key positions.
And John has made that
in
clear.
Response to the crisis. I think you should hear that because that does affect how people work.
But he has said that repeatedly for a long time leading up to this. What I would like to have an understanding, I suspect the committee in general, is what other areas were looked at. There's a not increasing spending because we haven't brought more staff on, and there's delaying other projects. We've delayed staff. What else are we delaying or has been considered for delay?
John?
Thank you for the opportunity. We examined the entire budget. We've looked at our needs. The roll-off truck that's paid entirely through funds that are fee-based is something that we need. I was talking to the mechanic yesterday or Wednesday, whenever that was, and he said, I wish we had ordered it already because it takes 6 months to get in and it's really in rough shape. We looked at several other areas that we think we could look at ways to either offset through grants or find reductions. And what we brought forward to the board last night or a few weeks ago, and which was approved last night, was what we believe we need to do to make sure that we're in a good position, along with several other contingency plans that we have in development that we'll be able to implement if needed, if revenues do come in shorter than we're currently projecting. And that's something that we're continuing in annualizing our expenses and our needs and making sure that we're only bringing things forward that we need to do. And with regards to Selectman Benson's point about staffing, we have held several key positions open since March, and that's going to continue for the near future. We've been able to reallocate resources a little bit given the way business is being operating right now, but it's going to continue to be more difficult. I know as we get into the construction season, not having a town engineer is certainly been challenging in the first few weeks, and it may be more challenging as we move forward. So things like that we're holding back on because we want to make sure that we have everything under control before we start adding people back into payroll.
David Martin?
Yeah, I believe that reducing the budget now is exactly the wrong thing to do, right? Since we have a bottom line budget, the budget allows us the flexibility to do things that we don't know what's going to happen. We haven't envisioned them, and we don't know what's going to happen in the next year. The time to cut is when we see revenues have a shortfall next year, and we'll then take action to spend less at that time, right? Now is the wrong time to do it. It just hamstrings us going into the next fiscal year, where it's hugely difficult to plan because we've never seen something like this before.
Anybody else? Christine? You're on mute.
Sorry about that. I guess one thoughtful follow-up to that is that the town isn't the only one who may be hurting for money in the future. There are a lot of people who are out of work and a lot of people who are uncertain about their jobs and their future. And we are implementing an epic tax increase this year. So keep that in mind. I appreciate that the town needs to prepare for loss of revenue, but we are asking a whole lot of people in very uncertain times at the same time. Just
Dave Wellinghoff, you got a hand up? No? Okay.
Steve Noon has his hand up.
Steve Noon, go ahead.
Yeah, just to Dave Martin's comment. I preface my remarks by saying how little we know about next year from a budgetary standpoint. But from a, I guess, optics point of view, this is the time to show some cuts, to make it very clear to the town meeting members that we do see a problem and we are beginning to take action. Whether it's enough, and that's a judgment call. But I think we really do have to show them that we're willing to take some action.
Mike Majors.
Yes, just to build on what Steve was saying, it probably makes sense to have, well, in agreeing with David Martin, I don't think we need to cut yet. In preparing the budget for next year, we probably should have like a budget A, and then a plan B, and the plan C. So if this happens, we'll have a budget scenario already prepared and discussed. And
you talking FY or 20?
That was said two meetings ago. So I'm agreeing with you, Mike. I'm absolutely agreeing with you. That was said 2 meetings ago. So have we codified any of the triggers? Have there been any conversations in the finance department about those triggers?
We worked through the town manager's office, Jason, and at this point, I'm in a battle zone. I'm in a battle room right now. I'm looking at a Rubik's Cube that John Mangiarotti asked me to prepare with 14 different budget strategies, short-term, long-term, dollar-based. So yeah, the boss has a plan in place for different spending cuts. You got to remember, right now, hiring freeze, only a COVID-19 freeze. I'm being asked to, assist in getting a large turn back. So we're putting our foot on the neck. We're leaning on the organization for a turn back while, as Dave Martin says, the beauty of the bottom line budget is, you can ameliorate, you can kind of, work your way around and get some things done. So, rest assured, we have, we got a lot of work to do, but we have, again, it kind of like when you asked me for the cash flow model, in early April, it wasn't finished. It wasn't ready to be pushed out the door. And, the capital plans are being developed as we speak, and they will be ready. And as, the selectman said, if we need to change course during FY21 at a town meeting, we'll be ready. To Steve Noon's point about showing them now, I think you gotta remember, we're still, 60 days in on a public health crisis where we got all all essential personnel on deck. We got waves coming over the top at times. That's the fun part of the job. But I guess the point is, John Mangiarotti, through his leadership, has pushed us through and pulled us along. And right now we pull our plans together. We go a meeting at a time. We'll be ready for ALG on the 4th. But I think you're probably right. We better be ready for that question at town meeting the end of June.
That's exactly my point. You're going to need the optics of this. If you're asked on June 29th what Plan B and Plan C are, and your answer is there's a 14 panel war room in my basement, especially considering how small this town meeting is going to be, you're asking for trouble. So sometimes I feel like I should have been raised in Missouri. My answer is always, that's great. I'm glad to hear you're working on it. Now show me.
Christie?
I think it would be really helpful for us and for the public in general to hear that the town is working on that. It's watching the Board of Selectmen's meeting again. It was, okay, here's what the cuts are that we've come up with. Out of a $36 million budget to only cut $215,000 doesn't look like a whole lot. Again, in a year when we're raising people's tax bills by anywhere between $800 or $900. I believe you guys are doing good work. No one knows about it. And it's a lot easier to take the budget if you're the public who is voting on it, if we understand that thought has gone into it. I know you guys, I know you're thoughtful about it. I'm not trying to impugn anyone. It's just, if we don't see it, if people don't see it and it's not being talked about, you don't know that it's there.
Steve Noon?
Yeah, for all you youngins out there, back in the day when we used to have operating overrides in this town, which means the early 2000s, the late 90s, every budget pretty much had an A and a B, because you could never assume that the override was going to pass. So it's not unheard of to say, yeah, we got the A budget, and then we've got the Plan B budget. The Plan B budget in this case is maybe not the worst case, but something worse than what we're hoping for. And generally, it was just a list of things that wouldn't be included, as opposed to a formal worked up budget. It was like you start with the A budget and then you start taking away things. Then that number has to, at least in my opinion, when we get to the town meeting, look credible given the crisis that we're dealing with. So right now, my advice is a couple $100,000 doesn't look credible given the size of the, whatever it's going to be, 20% of the people in the country are unemployed.
26.
So we need a Plan B that has a more credible looking number. That's all.
Thanks, Steve. Anybody else? All right, next agenda item. Pandemic update from Board of Selectmen and John Mangiarotti. Who would like to go? Is there John Benson, John?
Specifically to what?
Anything that we're dealing with that we haven't been discussing before? Any new information?
Just the from the BOS update that I sent out yesterday, I would like you to go on, read the executive summary of Attorney Natasha Tidwell's work on the Miriam School incident, and also to watch the YouTube video. I provided the link in there, which carries her presentation. I think that was incredibly impressive. With CARES funding, we have only allocated will be accessing $150,000 of it, $50,000 for a rental assistance program and $100,000 for a small business relief program. The hope is that there will be support gaining at the state level and then at the federal level to eliminate some of the restrictions on the use of those funds, to let it be applied to municipal revenue shortfalls. And there is, movement going in that direction there. So we're going to manage those funds, very carefully. I think there was some hope we could give more to rental assistance and more to businesses, but that was the most we felt comfortable with, and working on the hope that restrictions would be loosened so we can use those monies for anticipated revenue shortfalls. I think there's going to be a huge calling on the school side as it becomes clearer what not only our schools will have to do, but schools throughout the Commonwealth will have to do to both reopen and continue their operation in the next school year. Just simple things like, if you could only have so many kids on a bus, how do you get the kids to school? How do you have classes of 15 and keep it all going? So there's going to be real calls, as we get into the summer and start looking to the fall, and there's been no guidelines yet.
The $50K for rental assistance, that's on residential, I believe, correct? So
I'm sorry?
$50K for housing
residential rental, yeah.
Residential rental. So if a family is in hardship, they can come to the town some way, shape, or form and say, hey, I guess.
It was like $350 to $800 a month. And that's also there's also another program out there from the United Way COVID Impact Fund. They raised $175,000 in donations, and they're putting that plan in place with both the plan we approved and the United Way's plan. They actually go in a three-party arrangement with the renter, the landlord, and our entity, and we pay those expenses directly, so we know they're paid.
So in other words, if it's rental assistance, it's going to go directly to the landlord and not being given to the tenant.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Steve Noon.
Yeah, John, so this is kind of like a half-baked idea that just occurred to me while Dave Diedrichson was talking, but as opposed to, giving direct assistance to small businesses, could we get into some sort of tax forbearance? And since many of them don't own the building, some sort of like serial forbearance where we give it to the landlord under the condition that the landlord passes it on to the tenant. We don't actually give up the money because we'll collect it hopefully eventually, but just put it off, put the burden off for a while.
So you're saying deference, not forbearance.
Right. Well, forbearance is not pursuing them for.
Yeah, the issue, and we talked about a tax, abatement for a quarter. It was that got complicated. Whether it required, and that was along the lines that you said, that the landlord, the owner would get a forbearance, and that had to be passed on to her tenants in the form of rent reductions. Problem there is the complications as to whether town meeting needs to approve it, whether you need state approval for something like that. So the most direct way we, seemed to come up with was, starting a $100,000 grant relief program, and to make it so that it can be used by the recipients to pay their rents.
Well, my thought was abatements were way too complicated. And what I'm talking about is more or less telling Brian, not to place anybody for collections for a few months. So that would seem simpler.
Well, yeah. You know, I would imagine that a lot of these commercial, you know, property owners are in regular, you know, discussions with their tenants about how you're going to pay this. And, you know, somebody had said, well, Jesus, they're going to be, you know, wholesale evictions. But you know, when you think about it, you know, a good lawyer is going to tell a property owner, landlord client that, you know, yeah, we could throw these people out, you know, who's going to replace them? So isn't a half of something better than a whole of nothing?
Just a thought.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we'll kind of beat that one to death. Christy, you put me an email earlier, or text, I think what it was, regarding the updated town warrant. You want to take that up now?
We certainly can if you think it falls under this agenda item.
Well, I think it could fall under, you know, Finance Committee business. Or we could, I mean, I have no problem scheduling another meeting either. So I don't know how we want to vote right now, if we want to have a vote on the new proposed school budget and the town budget with the reductions. Is there any thought there?
I'm fine with proceeding as long as it's not a legal issue. I'm sorry, Roland, if other people are unmuted and you talk for some reason, it's all garbled and staticky, so I didn't catch what you just said.
Okay, so do we want to vote this evening on the reduction in the two plans with this, schools and the municipal side?
Should we start with opening the conversation that Christy wants to start about the warrants? Is that, and then we can determine if we're ready to vote or if we need to do it next meeting.
Okay, I'll leave that to you.
So the warrant has been reduced. I'm sorry, John Benson, can you tell me how many? Is it 24 articles at this point?
No, we have
30.
There are 30 articles. 20 are on consent. 10 are what you might call discussion articles, including 2 citizen zoning articles. And John will be asking the 2 citizen leaders of those groups, would they be willing to take it off with our agreement that at the next town meeting, the selectmen will place those 2 articles on the warrant. So we'll be dealing with eight discussion articles, one which deals with a property disposition at 3 School Street. The others are all budget or money articles.
Presumably the budget and money articles are the ones that we would care most to discuss amongst ourselves and potentially update our opinions on. The first article that comes up is the town operating budget. So do we want to have a broader discussion about that or decide based on what we've already said today? Looks like Roland wants to have a larger discussion, broader discussion.
I can go either way. I mean, I'm satisfied where we are right now. Again, as Steve Nunes pointed out, the issue is going to be 2 years down the road. I mean, I would like to have seen the town cut a little bit more than 215. I can understand the need for the truck at the transfer station because I use the transfer station and it's been extremely busy there, especially on Saturday with the social distancing and seeing the traffic back up on the Route 2 and crazy. But it works. And I can understand the need for the vehicle and the need to need one. And there comes a point where you, as we all know, you have a vehicle and you keep throwing good money into that, and the other point that it's just not worth repairing anymore. And Mr. Benson knows when his floor fell through and his glass fell out. Stone doesn't work very well. So I would just like to see other areas where we could possibly cut a little bit more. And I'm sure John will be working through that through the year as well as with
No, I don't think they're they're not planning on making any other cuts between now and June 4th, which is the next ALG meeting, which is when they're going to ask for consensus. The question is, do we feel that where we are now, that a $215,000 cut is enough at this time? And I would posit that it's not, and I've already recommended the next $100,000 that needs to go. And I would also suggest that I'd be more willing to have it on faith if I saw what Plan B and Plan C were. So no, at this point, if you're asking Roland and Christy if you've got my vote to go back to ALG on June 4th and say we're all set and we're not going to have any issues at town meeting, I'm probably in the minority. I'm used to being in that position. My answer at this time is no.
I'll poll everybody. Mike Majors?
Yes, I would agree to, with Jason. I wouldn't know.
I didn't understand that. Sorry, I was all jittery.
I heard Mike Majors say he agreed with me. I'm writing it down.
Yeah, it doesn't happen often, but that along with a 50% budget cut for the FinCom budget.
You want to take us from 500 to 250, which we've never spent anyway? Okay.
Well, why stop at 250? Why not take the whole thing? We have to take eliminate it. So $500. Yeah, well, that's a hot.
I'm not totally prepared to have the discussion now.
Okay.
I fully respect that. Roland and I are going to ALG on June 4th and need to be able to represent the committee for something. If that means we need to meet before then, that's fine. We just need to be prepared soon.
Yeah, that's fine. And maybe we could just talk at, I guess I'm more comfortable with the town budget and I'm not as up to speed on the school side of things.
Sahana and then Christine.
If I could just answer the school thing real quick. I'm sorry.
That's okay, go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Sahana. Yeah, so my early school committee report is that their original budget was represented a 3.29% increase plus 1 year debt service. They revised it down to a 2.18% increase plus 1 year debt service. That's going to work out to 2.36%. So from 3.29 to 2.36, and included in that is a $500,000 contingency for emergency unknowns. So they did cut 500,000 further, and then added that contingency bucket for dealing with unknowns. And that's honestly something that I'd like to see the town consider as well, is pull out more things that they thought they were going to spend money on, but maybe the right number is the same, except that you've defined the buckets clearly to address the situation we're in. So that's what I know of from the schools changes, Dave.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with the school.
So listening to all this discussion, actually, I'm ready to vote on it. The only other thing, when we are talking about cutting down on the budget, so we heard from the town manager as well as the board about the different, stuff that's being taken out, and you have cut down by about 200K. So since we are all asking as citizens, the committee is a citizen committee. So is it something that you can cut down on the services to the citizens of the town and see if you can reduce the budget? This is what we are looking for. Like instead of plowing the snow, at every snow, 1 inch or 2 inch, we have our roads cleared all the time. Maybe cut it down and maybe see if we can reduce the budget that way. Is that something that the committee is ready to think about? Is this what we are asking for?
I don't think we're asking for anything that actually has direct bearing on health and safety, and clearing the streets is a safety issue. If you're asking me if I think we should make a recommendation about not replacing police cars after 3 years and making it be 4 or 5, like every other person in town who's delaying capital purchases, yes. I appreciate your question, but if it's a health and safety thing, no, clearly not. I don't want to make health and safety changes. But anything that could possibly be perceived as a want instead of a need should not be in this budget.
Thank you for the clarification. For me, having gone through the entire thing, I'm ready to vote on it unless the committee decides otherwise.
You're on mute again, Roland.
Christine, back to you. How do you feel?
I guess I could vote on it, but they're not going to like the way I vote.
So actually, hold on. I see a message from Peter Light saying that he would, answer any school-related questions. So if anybody has some.
I believe we're just talking about the town budget right now, right?
Yeah, we're talking about the town, but I'll move Peter over so if he wants to comment, if we have any questions on that. Steve Noon.
I would tend to agree with Jason. I'd like to know a bit more about what the next cut might look like. I don't have to know all 14 scenarios, but 1 or 2 others would make me feel more comfortable with this level.
All right, let me pose this. If we came back with a series of triggers and steps, if during the course, if we would go with the manager's budget supplemented by a series of triggers and steps, if revenues drop by X dollars, we would have the following cuts. If it were reduced by revenues reduced by Y, we'd have these cuts. Reduced by Z, we'll have these cuts. Would that be satisfactory from your end?
Speaking for myself, yeah, but that's something I think we've mentioned a couple of times already.
No, if we came in with a specific series, that's what I asked.
Yes, since I'm already on record as saying that if we were to revote this, I would vote no at this point. Obviously, the devil is in the details. I'd love to see the budgets. I'm not going to say right now that just because you come back with some plan, I'm going to vote for it. I'd love to see what that plan is. I would propose that you get that to us no later than June 3rd, and I would request that the chair please schedule another finance committee meeting on June 3rd. He's going to have to post that tomorrow or Monday, and that would give the finance department and the town manager until Wednesday the 3rd to show us Plan B and Plan C, and give us last and final best budget, which gives us one last opportunity to discuss this before the LG meeting on June 4th.
So what we're talking about is Plan B and Plan C. Those are steps and triggers specific.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Because it was mentioned 2 meetings ago.
Understand.
So, given that, we definitely would have to have a meeting on June 3rd.
I would request that, please, Mr. Chairman.
We'll discuss the budget and any other voting articles. Go ahead, Christine.
John Benson, you mentioned if revenues only hit a certain level or drop by a certain amount, would that be tax collections? Because aren't we in a really bad world if tax collections are down?
Real estate tax collections.
Yeah.
We'd be in a very bad world, yeah.
It's got to be all of the above. It's got to be both tax collections. It's got to be what the state aid number comes in at. That is
Yeah.
Well, if what we're saying is take a 215K budget, that decreased budget you come up with now, or a doomsday, people aren't paying their taxes budget, I would like to see something that was in between those. I appreciate the idea of a trigger-based budget, but if the trigger is based on revenues, which means people aren't paying their taxes and they're potentially losing their houses, it seems like there's got to be a middle ground.
I'd like to see a good swag at what state aid. Let B and C should also have bearing on state aid. But Mr. Chairman, I definitely think that the town manager should be allowed to speak at this point because I've been speaking way too much.
Yes, John Mangiarotti.
Hi, thank you. I think as we discussed on the 19th, if there are revenue issues, we have five main categories of areas we're going to look to address whatever the shortfall may be. You could say if it's 500,000, if it's 5 million. I think these 5 options give us what we need to address those, and the bottom line budget would allow us to address those even without readjusting the budget. We could just implement those things with the Board of Selectmen's support to make sure that we hit our mark. First of all, the budget that we presented to you or to the board has all the positions that we're currently holding fully baked with benefits and everything. And that's, if you start adding up the 5 to 8 positions that we have vacant, you're getting close to a few $100,000, several $100,000 right there. Those positions we're planning to hire next year if things get better. If things don't get better, we won't hire them. So that'll take the first tier of issues that I think we're talking about. Our next measure would be to continue to evaluate any vacancies that come up from between now and then. We'll have people that are going to retire. We have people that are going to move on or whatever happens. And as we always do, we'll look at those vacancies and determine whether A, we need to fill that position, or B, whether it's a good time to do some sort of reorganization to better align the needs of today and the future with our staffing. And there's often savings when we do those things. And that's something that we would do anyways, but in a situation like this, it would have more momentum. The third thing we would do is consider further reducing subsidies. We include subsidies in several of our fee-based programs, and that's an area that we would look to take reductions if we needed to. The fourth we would either reinstitute or just continue right along with a non-essential and non-emergency spending freeze. That can really limit what we spend as an organization. And again, as a bottom line budget, if there are needs that we need to meet in budget programs, we can realign resources to fund those programs to cover a huge shortfall if one exists. And the fifth would be consider service level reductions. And in that fifth category would mean things that we provide today that people value. We would look at either changing those in ways that save money or eliminating them in ways that save money. Those are all things that we talk about every year during budget process. We talked about it at the Hill this year. We spent 2 hours brainstorming on that. We talk about it on a regular basis, and we're prepared to take measures necessary to make sure that whatever happens with revenue, we have a way to address it. And that's what we presented to the board, and I believe that's what they were comfortable with, and that's what we're telling you that we can do right now. I think if you want us to come back and put positions up on a screen, I really don't want to do that. That's not something I do. I want to do it all, and I don't think it's effective or appropriate, really. So I think what we have before you is a lot of options that we've already exercised to date, and it's going to result in a decent turn back this year. And if needed, we can put those in place further and continue to monitor the revenue situation and make changes as needed.
Thanks, John. Steve Noon.
So my opinion, the easiest thing to do is not individual positions, but if you've got the positions that you're holding fully baked into this budget, I can tell you right now, you're probably not going to have them all on board July 1st. You'll be lucky if you get them on board halfway through the year. So there's savings right there. That's a number you can calculate. You can calculate all those numbers, John. They don't have to be specific positions. I wouldn't list the positions and compensation either, but I would list them as a group, open positions. If we hire them halfway through FY21, we'll save this much. If we hire them all the way, if we don't hire them in FY21, we'll save this much. I would just make a fairly short list of those 5 things you just mentioned and what the dollar impact could be of them, and that would be sufficient. Right now, what you're telling me is you got a list, and kind of we can't see it, which is not the way that, from a transparency point of view, we ought to be working. So,
well, it's not that you can't see it. It's just that every month the needs of the organization change. In the current environment, they change every day. The way that we're handling this pandemic, our needs are changing daily. Normally, they change on a slower pace. But I think with those 5 levers I just identified, I'm comfortable that I can work with the Board of Selectmen to make sure that we're using the correct ones for the correct time and what we need as the organization at the time. We could put together a plan now that doesn't make any sense 6 weeks from now, never mind 3 months from now, which is, we certainly can come back and assign dollar values to these things. I could probably do it now, but it's probably not a good idea. I just wanted to impart that we could commit to not hiring all those positions for 2 months and see what that saves us, but we might really need one of those positions in the first month. And that's where the bottom line budget comes in. So, I'm happy to do what's needed, but this budget, given what we know today about the future of revenues, this is what we think is appropriate to bring forward, with the idea that we can react and make changes that are necessary.
And I fully understand what you're saying, except you're kind of forgetting about what our role is. And I don't want to put Roland or anybody else on this committee in a position of having to say at town meeting that there's a plan to save money if things get bad, but we have no idea what it is. Because we're advising the town meeting members on what they should think about this budget. So the simplest way to do it is to put some quantification. You can use range numbers around your 5 levers, and that would make me happy.
So, Mr. Chairman, do we need to take a vote to revoke our current approval for this budget, or should we hold off until next Wednesday?
Hold off till next Wednesday.
Very well.
Well, the numbers changed, Jason, so we'd have to vote it anyway.
Right. So I just don't want. I fear that, God forbid we don't do anything. The current printing of the draft warrant says that we have approved this, and I'm afraid too much has changed in the last couple of months for that to stand. Christy?
I'm confused. The numbers in the warrant article for the town budget haven't actually changed. Is there something I'm not understanding about what that number is based on?
Okay.
John Mangiarati or John. So the operating budget is Article 2. The changes occurred in other articles to impact the change in our total spending package. Operating budget remained at 2.5%.
Okay. Again, in terms of perception to taxpayers, it'd be really good if the operating budget number was different. Because when I looked at this in the past, thought, okay, that's what it costs to run the town. And what we're saying is, on the one hand, it makes sense that it costs the same to run the town in a bad time, but we're also saying that we're not changing at all. We're not taking into account the difficult position taxpayers are in when we're figuring out those expenses.
Christine?
So I'd also like to just say that the school built in you know, an emergency, we're just not sure what we're going to need on certain levels fund that they're putting in their budget. And they took that from other initiatives and said, yeah, we would have liked these, but there are these unknowns that we know are going to cost us money. We don't know what they are. This seems like a reasonable amount of money to put aside for that. And that didn't, you know, they could have reduced the budget by 500,000. And I appreciate that they built in that level of you know, unknown, and the town budget may have that because you're a top-down budget, but it needs to look like it has that instead of looking like it's business as usual, but will not spend on the things that you, the town, have said it's okay to spend the money on if we need not. So it's a preparedness idea that is lacking for me, and you know, dollar figures around that preparedness.
That said, I don't want Superintendent Light, who is listening in on this call, to think that if all of a sudden things are better than we thought, that $500,000 is completely slush fund discretionary. But no, I do appreciate that they identified what they're gonna reduce by that $500,000, but they're holding that $500,000 in reserve, for lack of a better term. That's a technical term. I shouldn't use that. They're holding that $500,000 in case.
In emergency, yeah.
Right.
Peter's on the call. Why don't we have Peter comment on that right now, if he's willing to? Peter?
Not to be put on the spot at all, but here you go.
No. So, you know, this is one element of our budget, and I can talk about the rest later, but we did, you know, overall we reduced the budget by about $1 million, but then we added back in a $500,000 contingency fund, with the understanding that if it's needed for COVID-related purposes, then that would be the use of that fund for the unanticipated issues that we potentially might deal with. However, if we don't need that money, that's going to be returned into reserves at the end of the following year, knowing that we think FY22 is probably more challenging than FY21.
Thank you. Any other further discussion on this topic, Christy?
I'd like to get a better sense of the committee. I thought Jason started off strong, and Mike, and what they felt about the current numbers. I want to make sure we and the town and the Board of Selectmen are walking away with the same idea of, are we asking them to prepare to change the budget that they are presenting, or simply to prepare a secondary level of triggers or secondary budget for us to also look at?
Secondary, and I'll let Jason and Christine comment on that, and Steve Noon.
I would say I'd like to see the secondary budget first and foremost, but honestly, I believe somebody else said that it feels like there are still wants in here instead of needs, and I agree with that. I would definitely like to see this be, you know, $215,000 on a $36 million budget is 0.5%, 0.59. It's okay, I'll round up 0.6%. I do not feel that a 0.6 reduction in the budget that was presented pre-COVID is commensurate with the level of rainy day that we are currently experiencing and going to experience in the next couple of years. And therefore, I would like to see it reduced even more. While I understand entirely Mr. Benson asking if we'd be happy with just the Plan B and the Plan C, I think that's table stakes. I think that should absolutely be presented to us by June 3rd, so that we can review it in time for the next ALG meeting. But my personal opinion is 0.6% reduction does not begin to capture the level of severity that I feel we are experiencing.
Steve Noon, any comments?
I primarily would like to see Plan B, Plan C, whatever, because I want to see what the whole picture looks like. What the specific budget to me right now is not as critical as how we deal with the uncertainty that we're facing.
Mike Majors?
Yeah, I think we're going in the right direction, but I think it's hard for us in micromanage the town budget, and I don't think that's our role. I think we need to let John and the finance department do their job. They know what needs to be done. They know the kind of information we need to, as a form of to provide oversight and advisory capacity for some of those budget items. But I don't think we're in a position, from 10 miles away above the budget to say, what specific dollar amount that needs to be cut, or what jobs need to be eliminated, or what things need to be deferred. I'm saying let John do his job. Let the finance department do their job. They know the number. They know how the town works. And then they get back to us with the the different scenarios, plan B, plan C, and so forth, and we go from there. But I don't want to be in a position to be arrogant, really, to say, well, you need to cut it by this much because of optics. Just let them do their job, and they're doing a good job, and let's see what they come up with.
Just running quick numbers, the school budget is down 1.5% from the last time around.
Christie?
Rather than be offended by the pointed use of the term optics there, to be clear, when I say optics, it's recognizing the fact that right now it's about 26% of the country's population is unemployed. Majority of people I know have taken some sort of pay cut or have lost their job. I'm not talking about marketing or perception here so much as people are hurting. In that case, how much do we think the budget should decrease? There are cuts, and some of it is going to come down to the optics of how does this look to the taxpayers when it comes to time for them to approve this or not.
And if I could just add, I definitely would love to know what our contingency plan is if, God forbid, the skeleton crew that shows up for a town meeting on June 29th happens to run away with our best intentions and whatever we happen to agree with among the boards.
Hey, Martin?
Yeah, I would say that again, that this is not really, in my mind, the time to cut. With people hurting all over the place, the demands on the town are going up, not down. And to say that that this is that the country is hurting and that this is a good time to cut back on town expenditures, I think is just wrong. Right. We need to have all hands on deck to be able to satisfy the needs of the citizens, and we don't even know exactly what to expect. I mean, I completely understand that we want to know, what we would the levers we would need to pull if revenues don't come in the way they were budgeted. And I understand that, and I'm completely okay with that. But I don't think that this is the time to cut the town budget. Especially, I mean, the main operating budget, there's really not a lot to cut except people. I mean, there just isn't things there.
And bathrooms.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
And bathrooms.
Oh, I didn't know whether that was a capital expense or I was assuming that was not an operating expense.
It's not an operating expense.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay. So since we kind of have gone through the pandemic outlook as well, Finance Committee business. Brian, you sent out minutes. So is there a chance to review the minutes? That would, what was the date, Brian, on that? Yes, you're on mute.
I sent out meeting minutes last Wednesday evening, May 20th, for April 1st, if anybody's had a chance to look at them.
Any comment on those? Peter? You're on mute.
So sorry to interrupt. I just didn't know if you needed any additional information from schools with regard to our budget. I just want to make sure you feel like you have everything you need from us.
I do. I'm comfortable with the school budget myself. Does anybody else need any information, more information on that?
Do we need to revote it, Roland? Because it's changed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to take that up right now. Somebody wants to make a motion.
Move to approve the school budget as amended.
Move to approve the school budget, the school Acton Boxborough Regional School District assessment to the sum of $65,584,049 to defray the necessary expenses of the Acton Boxborough Regional School District.
Second.
We come to vote, and it says be a roll call vote. So I'll go who I see order on my screen. Steve Noon.
Aye.
Mike Majors.
Aye.
Christie.
Aye.
Christine Russell.
Aye.
Jason Cole.
Aye.
Sahana oh, I can't say your last name, sorry.
Go ahead. It's okay. Aye.
And that leaves me up because I don't see Dave Wellinghoff.
He's there.
Mr. Wellinghoff, are you there? David?
Maybe not.
He's on mute, and his camera's not there. So I will give mine as an aye. I don't know what we should do about David right now.
Adam, are you a voting member yet?
I am not yet, but this week it's on me. I haven't finished my 2 items.
Oh, unforgivable, Adam.
Adam. All right, so Adam will be next time. So I guess the motion passes with David abstention because he's not there.
Thank you,
everyone.
I also want to commend Peter and the school committee and everybody for doing such a great job with what we're dealing with.
Thank you.
All right.
I will let you all go tonight if that's okay, unless you have anything else for me.
No, we're good. Thank you, Peter.
All right, take care, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Steve Noon.
I have a liaison report on healthcare. If you
Okay,
guys,
we have the minutes right now, so we'll do that right after that. So does anybody want to make a motion on the minutes?
I'll move we approve them.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote again. So it's not with Dave Wellinghoff, but he's not there. So Sahana,
Aye.
Jason Cole,
Aye.
Christine Russell,
Aye.
Christy Anderson,
Aye.
Nick Majors,
Aye.
Steve Noon,
Aye.
and myself as an aye. All right, so now committee reports. Mr. Noon.
Health Insurance Trust met this morning. Brian, Steve Barrett, and I were on the phone at 8:15. The most significant thing that was pointed out was that our claims for the month of April had fallen by 35%, and that our consultant said that that's a number that she'd seen pretty much across the board with all of her clients. It kind of brings home the point that, you know, the healthcare industry, other than those who are working on COVID, are seeing a real downturn in their business. So as far as we go, we may see some of that come back after the first of the year. Some of it is just gone and probably won't repeat. Things like people getting injured in car accidents that didn't happen, or kids getting injured playing sports that didn't happen. Nothing about people getting hurt skiing that need procedures and can't get them. But
physical therapy is down and they're not open, so I can't go.
That's just mean. That's just mean, Steve.
The other thing we discussed, and I will be asking you for some opinions at a point in the future, is the Health Insurance Trust wants to put in a reserve policy, maybe setting some maximums and minimums on what we're carrying as a percent of claims, and if we then decide we have any more than we need, what to do with excess reserves, an investment policy, or perhaps returning money to the.
So the question is, Steve, what is that now a percentage is reserves, and can you invest that money other than?
Right now, we're carrying unrestricted total reserves. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Barrett, of about $5 million, which is about 34% of our claims, which by some measures is a bit excessive. We carry reserves for what's called INBR, or incurred but not reported claims. In other words, things that have happened that haven't worked their way through the system. The estimates are that's somewhere between 7 and 10% of your claims, and that you should probably carry roughly 3 times that. So by that guideline, our reserve should be anywhere between 21 and 30% of our claims, and they're in excess of that right now. Now, in the past, we've been, for a couple of years, we curtailed the rate increases to use up some of the reserves. We were doing that again this year. However, with the fall off in claims in April, that will probably repeat itself in May and June, we probably will not wind up using up much of the reserves, not as much as we thought we would. So after that, then it becomes a question of where can we legally place the money, and that's so we would need a reserve policy, and we have not yet discussed what kinds of things that we might want to put the money in. Most of what we can put the money in does not pay any return worth noting at the moment. But it's a discussion we will have in the upcoming meetings, and yeah, I would at some point like to get some input from the committee.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other committee updates? Jason?
The Twin School Building Committee update is that the test pits for the geothermal wells are being drilled today and tomorrow. They have to be drilled and then left alone for a week. And then they can do their measurements about the thermal conductivity, efficiency, etc. So we'll have a better understanding of that. It's very important that we have that data, because one of the largest variables in this project is the number of wells that are going to be needed to get the building efficiency that we're looking for. Other things with regard to the school building committee, there is going to be there is some conversation about a specific Board of Health requirement for a denitrogenization system for our septic system. It is to be determined about whether or not we're going to have to do an appeal to the Board of Health. But that's definitely a concern, and is a potentially $500,000 to $560,000 variable in our project. So that's something that we're going to need to address. Speaking about making sure that the town plays nice with the different entities. The other thing that is of interest to the committee is I believe we will need an answer from the town in the next couple of weeks about how we are handling building permit fees, whether we are going to use the standard formula for how to determine the building permit fee, or if we're going to go to an actual accrued fee, actual accrued expensing, which would then be split according to regionalization rules with Boxborough. So that's just a heads up that now that Consigli is actually starting to needing to pull permits, then we're going to need an answer on that in the near future. So for the Board of Selectmen and the town manager, I'm sure you're already aware of it, but this is going to become a hotter issue in the very near future. And then you should always end on a high note. It is important to report that they are starting to do excuse me. They're starting to do the tear down of the 4 classrooms and the installation of the temporary trailers yet in the month of June, earlier than the previously determined close of school days. So they're finally taking our advice and finally being able to move forward enough to be able to take advantage of this unfortunate situation where the site is unoccupied many, many weeks in advance of what would normally be expected. So that's the update for the school building committee.
Thank you. Any other committee updates? Christine?
Oh, I already spoke about the school committee update. So I will just say that I will be doing my part for the health insurance industry because I am actually scheduled for my ACL repair surgery on June 3rd.
Good luck.
I will not be at any June 3rd meeting because I expect to be drugged out of my mind. Thank you very much.
Oh, fun.
Should we have our meeting on June 2nd?
I'm not available on the 2nd, but
who are we going to lose?
And we gave the town manager and board of selectmen the 3rd.
I believe they're going to need all that. I believe it's appropriate for us to give them all the time that we possibly can.
Yes.
So let's stick with the 3rd. Sorry, Christine, but convalesce well.
Absolutely. So, okay, we'll leave it on the 3rd. We'll have our next meeting at 7 o'clock. I will send the agenda out. I have till Monday this time, which is pretty good. I'll just have that one agenda topic item on there that would be the budget.
Well,
and
let's have it be, let's review all of let's make sure that we make all of our recommendations with regard to the warrant. And I would ask that the town come, or the Board of Selectmen come with what their plan is for 3 School Street.
Okay, so David Martin, go ahead.
So there isn't a plan for 3 School Street. This vote is just to allow us to take advantage of an opportunity should one arise. So if we have an opportunity to sell the property that passes the conditions, not quite conditions, it's maybe too strong a word, but the uses that we put on in the disposal of that property, we can take advantage of it. So there isn't a plan.
At the public building that's right across from Exchange Hall,
Let's take it up on our next meeting. It's getting long in the tooth tonight, but let's make it be a final scrub of the revised warrant article, if I could be so bold.
Okay, revised warrant article, that will be in there, and then budget, municipal budget. Anything else we need to discuss tonight? Mike Vagers.
Yeah, just for my update, I got a haircut this week.
Excellent. I went to Bueno Isano.
Oh, good.
Very good.
But in addition to that, the EDC has been really actively trying to come up with policies and programs that will support the small business community in Acton. And John Benson and the Board of Selectmen have been extremely helpful. And I think one of the things, if anything, at least we're getting the conversation going and build a little momentum, and it's still
it should be
emergency.
It shouldn't just be small business; it should be all business. Because just not, I mean, I understand the small business are hurting, but so it's every other business in town too. It's not just the small business.
Well, we talked about businesses with up to $1.5 million in revenue. We're not interested in helping chains out and stuff like that.
Well, you don't have to worry about Kmart.
Pardon?
You don't have to worry about Kmart.
Well, Fidelity just bought it, didn't they?
No.
Okay.
No, we're not going to buy a losing proposition. Christy.
John, I was listening to what Roy had to say about, I think it's CocoFit. I thought he said they had close, just over $1 million in revenues. Do you have any idea if it's the size you were talking about, how much that limits, what that limits the number of local businesses to?
It's a work in progress. I'm not familiar with the revenue numbers of businesses, throughout the town, but it was geared for revenues up to, $1.5 million.
Martin?
And one of the things we haven't determined yet is whether all that revenue has to be in Acton or part of it outside, and how much we count, right? So there are a couple of restaurants, local small chains that have 2, 3, or 5 restaurants in the area, and so what revenue do we count there? We haven't figured that all out.
Well, I think it's also true is you got to look at businesses. You have Joseph Banks that said, yeah, it's a big corporation, but they're in next to Staples. So is Talbot's. Well, what happens if those stores go out? Now we have 2 more vacancies.
Yeah, we haven't figured that situation yet.
That's the reality of this whole thing. That or the car dealers. We have 4 of them in town. Well, they're having expenses right now. They get some service revenue, sure, but they're not selling vehicles, and they're carrying them on their books, and they're paying interest on the loans for that. And their salesmen are out there working, which is then again they're not buying lunch in Acton or dinner. And I think it's just something that we got to be extremely cognizant of, that we have these other businesses in town, Donlands and stuff like that. Well, what happens if they say, hey, this COVID thing, I did terrible and I'm going to close that store? Now what happens?
No, what this is geared to is small retail, operations.
I just don't want us to ignore the other ones in town either.
Well, we could turn, there was one suggestion that was made that we dedicate $1 million of the $2.1 million in CARES money for business aid. Now, that's a great idea, but it's just not responsible. Right. We only have so much money to work with. We've got to be realistic about it.
Yeah, leverage the federal dollars, but local taxpayer dollars should not go to business. Period.
We have the only thing we've done in that regard is to delay the tax payments, which you know of and you weren't too happy about. But anyway, that's the only thing we've done there.
But my piece on that one. I'll be quiet now.
All right, here we tonight. All right, so we'll have our next meeting next Wednesday, the 3rd.
Dave Wellinghoff, did you want to say something?
Motion to adjourn.
No.
Oh, you missed the vote, Mr. Wellinghoff, on approval of the schools.
It's kids' bedtime. Excuse me.
If you want to voice your opinion on that now, you may do so. We all
I would need a full refresh on the topic. Let's table it.
He abstained.
Okay, anytime. All right. So do I have a motion?
I'll second it since he took my motion.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's good. Now I need to have a roll call vote. Steve Noon.
Aye.
Mike Majors.
Aye.
Christy Anderson.
Aye.
Christine Russell.
Aye.
Tahana,
Aye.
Jason,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
we're adjourned.
Night,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good evening, folks.
Good evening, guys.